listening to a One Pint Stand, a Minnesota craft beer podcast that tells the stories of craft beer in Minnesota and beyond. So kick back, relax, and grab a cold one. The show starts now. Hello, my name is Dan Bobian, and I write, produce, and host a One Pint Stand. I'm ecstatic that you're listening. This podcast has been a passion project of mine since 2016. Now, you may have noticed that it's been several weeks since an episode came out. I usually like to have episodes coming out every 2 weeks, but I took a little hiatus to travel to Seattle for a week of craft beer excitement. So I'm back and ready to deliver some more engaging craft beer content. We're coming back with a doozy. On this episode, I sit down with Bob Galligan, the Director of Government and Industry Relations at the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. Bob's been involved in the craft beer industry for years. Now, I knew he was smart and dialed in to the current goings-on in Minnesota craft beer, but he's basically a walking history lesson when it comes to Minnesota craft beer, and I did not know that, so we had a great time. We talk about what he does with the Guild, what the Guild does, how Minnesota has become a blueprint for THC and kind of a beacon for other states looking to enact their own THC legislation. And we also, he gave some wonderful insights on the unstable footing for craft breweries and what that means for consumers going forward. I think you're really going to enjoy listening to the beer conversation. So let's head out to Bad Weather Brewing in St. Paul for my interview with Bob Galligan. Cheers. Welcome to another episode of a One Pint Stand. Today I'm being joined by Bob Galligan, Director of Government and Industry Relations at the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. And we're recording here on kind of a gloomy / sunny /
surprisingly warm but windy.
Mother Nature can't decide. Very Minnesotan.
Yeah, that's season.
We're at Bad Weather in St. Paul, and before we pressed record, Bob and I were chatting, saying that this is just such a go-to spot for beer for locals, and we figured out Bob lives in West St. Paul, and I grew up in West St. Paul, so we're practically brothers. Bob, thank you so much for taking time. Yeah. I know this is a ridiculously busy time of year.
We are in session, so I don't get a whole lot of time to come out and play quite as much. But having said that, the legislators are on Passover recess for the next couple of days, so picked a fine time. But no, thank you for having me on. I know we've tried to do this a few times, and I'm glad it finally worked out, and really excited to be on here. So
yeah. Now, the first thing I noticed before we get into any of the conversation is this: in the last 3 times I've seen you, 2 of those times you've been wearing a tuxedo. So this is it's kind of odd to see you in a t-shirt.
Dressed down a little bit. And no point in the past kind of 12 to 13 years that I've been in the industry did I ever quite imagine that I would be the person throwing on a suit and tie regularly. But here we are. Somebody literally has to do it. So I have my collar days, as I like to say, where I throw on my collar. But I'm a little more comfortable on days like this. So.
Yeah, it's nice. So there's so many things I want to talk to. You are so plugged in the Minnesota craft beer scene, the political scene, anything that really has to do with beverage. You kind of have your finger on the pulse. So I'm really excited to pick your brain on some of the things. But before we get into it, can you just tell me what got you into craft beverages back in the day?
Yeah. I mean, I'll give you as short of a version as I can. But ultimately, I got my degree in acting from the Guthrie program at the university. And right after college, I was hired on for this company that was traveling around to different colleges. And the founder of that company was Minnesota's first certified Cicerone, Michael Agnew, who still writes for the Strib here and there. And so as I was a 22, 23-year-old going around the country and performing after shows. You know, it was not like, let's hit Applebee's. It was like, we need to go to this new brew pub. And so that's kind of how I got introduced to the culture of craft beer. And that was very much still back at the time of, you know, craft beer is 99% asshole free, that kind of mentality.
Yeah.
And I found a lot of the craft brewers had a lot of passion. They cared about craft beer quite a bit. And so Michael kind of opened up the world to me in that regard. And then I ended up moving to Austin, Texas with a friend in late 2011. I thought there would be more acting opportunities down there just because it's an artsy city, but not quite theater heavy. I was wrong. There were no acting opportunities in Austin anymore at that point. So I kind of broadened my idea of what I could do, and again was attracted to craft beer. And I was the first beer Sherpa for the Austin Brew Bus, which is it was kind of the first of those type models where you know, spend $80 and take a bus to 3 different breweries, try the beer, take tours, meet the brewers, that kind of thing. And through that, I met some of the brewers of Austin, including a fella who, on my orientation, it was his first tap room weekend ever. So I got to meet him and slowly but surely kind of wore him down, and he eventually hired me as I was quote-unquote chief packaging officer. In day one, which means I was putting beer into cans 2 at a time. I could only seam them 1 at a time, dipping them in freezing sanitizer. I was doing like 8 cases an hour, which is dumb.
Oh my God.
But that's where you started back then. And then after about a year and a half, the head brewer who trained me in kind of the technical brew side of things moved away to start his own thing, actually in Nashville, Smith & Lentz, which is a pretty popular brewery. Adler Lentz, it was one of my mentors who taught me kind of everything. And when he left, somebody had to take over head brewer, so I did that for about a year and a half. And a lot of that was doing research and development, actually. So we had a smaller brew house, a 3-barrel. And I think in 2014, I brewed like 192 different recipes on that system, and kind of got burnt out. But also the tap room wasn't making the money it needed to, so I went over and ran the tap room for a year and a half. Then built a quality assurance, quality control program with a focus on sensory science. And then when I moved back home to Minnesota, Surly was looking for a sensory specialist, so I applied and I got that job. So I was a sensory specialist at Surly for about 5 years.
Okay.
And then I served on the board for about a year and a half during the pandemic. And then once our executive director left, somebody had to kind of take over government relations, but also since I had been in the industry for over a decade, kind of more of the industry side of things, so kind of trying to keep track of allied trade members and ingredient suppliers, and like you said, kind of try to keep your finger on the pulse as best you can, which is literally impossible, especially nowadays with how quick everything is going. But yeah, so that's kind of how I ended up where I am.
That's fascinating. I didn't know how far back your journey went. When you think about when you came back to Minnesota after Texas, you think about then and now. For you, what is the biggest thing that just impresses you or blows your mind about beer in Minnesota?
One of the main things that I really appreciate about the brewing culture in Minnesota, one is its history. And I think not a lot of people really fully comprehend just how long and storied the brewing history in the state really is. Every state has its own brewing history, but Minnesota in particular, just because, you know, we were the northern gateway of the Mississippi. You know, you can grow all the grain you want in the breadbasket of America, but it has to go somewhere to get shipped to the rest of the world, and the Twin Cities was it. And so that's part of the reason why Minnesota, and because our location both to the lakes, but also right above the Prairie du Chien Aquifer, which, you know, Schmidt Brewery right down the street, is one of the thinnest places to the Prairie du Chien Aquifer, so easy access to clean water. So just a number of different things. I think that not a lot of people really realize that, you know, Minnesota had more breweries than Wisconsin at some point. Minnesota had, you know, one of the largest breweries when Hams was open, was, you know, top 5 breweries, I believe, in the country at the time. So I think that history to me is something that I draw a lot of kind of passion and fuel from. But seeing that history shift into innovation is where I see a lot of my friends in Minnesota brewers excel. Of knowing the past, taking care of the past, being cognizant of lagering techniques and hopping timage and all of that, to build something new and to find new paths or what separates your Pilsner from somebody else's. So I think there's, from that history and that innovation is kind of where craft comes from. And I think especially because a lot of Minnesota's brewers respect that history as well. We tend to be, in my opinion, one of the more well-read, well-researched brewing cultures when it comes to craft beer. There aren't that many people I know that are just kind of throwing things in a tank and seeing what happens. Like, there is planning and a very kind of using the scientific method to figure things out, which is exactly, in my opinion, what beer should be. So I see a sense of responsibility from the brewers of this state that I don't necessarily see in other beer states and cultures.
Yeah. Where are some of your favorite breweries to go?
Oh, I mean, come on now. I represent all of them, so obviously all of them are my favorite. But no, honestly, a lot of it is where I can travel to. I still have not seen as many breweries in the state as I hope I should, just because I don't necessarily get out and about as much as I should. So this summer, hopefully, I'll be traveling a little bit more and seeing some of the other spaces that the state has to offer. But honestly, Wabasha Brewing is my local, so I'm there a decent amount, and I think they do some good beer, and it's just a cool vibe and cool culture. But then also, you have your kind of larger players, and they're larger for a reason.
Right.
As a former employee of Surly, yes, I go to Darkness Day, and I try to stop in frequently and keep tabs as to what they are doing, what they're producing. Modest is kind of killing the game in this kind of new, hemisphere of THC beverages on top of really cool innovative beers. So obviously one of my favorites. Our office is right down the street from Indeed, so we're there a decent amount. But at the end of the day, I mean, I really appreciate the fact that we're at a time now where, for the most part, I can at least trust the beer of any brewery I'm going to be walking in, and that was not always the case in craft beer.
Right.
I can basically understand that there's going to be something on tap that I'm going to enjoy, and whether or not a tiny little 3-barrel, 7-barrel system can effectively lager 100%, maybe not producing the cleanest, but that doesn't mean that it's not good, and that doesn't mean that their IPA is not going to be fantastic. So I'm very appreciative of the fact that I don't have to necessarily be wary of walking through any doors, whereas once upon a time I would be. But I tend to frequent most of the breweries that are closest to me, or in between me and the capital, which is pretty much at Wabasha, Waldman, Badweather.
You've triangulated
Gambit,
it well. It could be a lot worse.
Barrel Theory. Yeah. So there are some good ones. And I meet a lot of legislators at St. Paul Brewing as well. I really love that space. I think they do amazing beer. It's cool to see them become a brew pub and how they've expanded. But again, just the history of drinking in the old hams, employee areas. I love it.
I'm really surprised until recently, more hasn't been done with that space. I'm happy to see that it's finally being developed because it is such a neat part of Minnesota history. I want to go back for a second to something that you just said. The idea of like not being wary of walking into a place where I feel like the quality and dedication to making sure that the process is right, everything is right, and the beer coming out of the taps is of a certain standard. Do you think it's possible to point to a certain thing or a point in time when breweries all of a sudden were like, okay, this has to be the expectation, and if we're not there, we shouldn't be charging people for beer?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and I don't know that there was necessarily an exact point in time. I would say probably a lot of this shift maybe came in 2015, 16, 17, somewhere kind of around there. And that's not just because that's when I started researching quality, but that is part of it.
Follow the money.
Yes, it turns out. But I think there was, around that time, in my opinion, things started to really shift, especially with the introduction of hazy IPAs. And that kind of drew a line in the sand for a lot of brewers. And a lot of the brewers who were trained or went to school, were very hesitant to play around with hazy IPAs. Because if you know how to brew a beer, if you just cooled that tank down, you would get pretty much the same flavor. It would just be clean. So a lot of the trained brewers were kind of against it because it was quote unquote dirty beer. But we also, once we saw that it was selling and people started seeing, well, maybe we can see if we can do something with this. Then we started seeing like things of there's a fermentation technique of dry hopping with yeast still in solution, not something you normally do. And it turns out when you do that, that gives like a really heavy kind of like rose base type note to it that you can only get through that process. We never would have discovered that if it weren't hazy IPAs forcing brewers who know what they're doing to experiment and to research and develop. So I think that kind of led to all right, like we can actually break this down and pinpoint this in a lot of ways. And that was the hazy IPAs too. Stabilization was really, really difficult to figure out for a number of years. Of finally getting an actual shelf stable hazy IPA was pretty much impossible. Again, brewers eventually kind of took the time to research and dive in and read academic articles. I still remember from my head brewer in QA/QC days of going on the Master Brewers Association quarterly and typing in an issue and being forced to read for 2.5 hours just this highly scientific language that came from Miller Coors in 1985. And I kind of miss those days. But I mean, the brewers who are worth their salt like digging into that kind of stuff and figuring that out. And I think the industry kind of hit a turning point where people started really enjoying that and celebrating that. But I also think a large part of it is community at the end of the day, because not everyone is a member of the MBAA. Not everyone has time or resources to research a lot of this. So one of the things that I've always really loved about this industry is we are here to help each other out, and that means knowledge as well. There's not a whole lot of craft brewers out there with trade secrets necessarily, and there's a reason for that. So I think that kind of camaraderie is also kind of that has gotten us to a point where now, if you taste a beer that your buddy made and it has diacetyl, you can tell them, hey, man, I'm picking up diacetyl. And it's not like a dick thing. It's just like, oh, well, okay, you're right. We had to rush that because, the chiller went down or something when that. You've kind of figured it out. It's not like a mean or cruel thing to let your buddies know that there are off flavors. And the brewers who are really worth their salt will say, thank you for telling me that. I appreciate that. And I think it's cool to see that the industry has gotten mature enough where we can kind of just have those conversations openly. Yeah.
It's just been fun to see it evolve. And I think that, like you said, I think we're at a really good spot comparatively to other craft beer destinations in the United States. I feel that we stack up very well to the Portlands, the Seattles, the Denvers, because it's a really exciting scene because, yes, you've got the Twin Cities, but you can travel an hour south, an hour north, an hour west, and hit some pretty tremendous breweries. And that's not often the case in other places.
Yep.
So I think we're almost spoiled. The feedback that I heard when the Craft Brewers Conference was here was people were like, wow, you all have a great beer scene. And that feels good because in many other areas, being a Minnesotan, if you're a sports fan, there's not much to celebrate other than the Lynx. And if you're of a certain age, that you remember the Twins. But it's really cool to hear people excited about something going on in Minnesota.
Yeah, and I think part of that is still kind of a mentality of Minnesota as quote-unquote flyover country, right? I mean, like, people don't necessarily, unless it's for work, they don't have a whole lot of reasons that draw them here. We're just not kind of first of mind. But, of course, in true Minnesotan fashion, we know that we're kicking ass. We just don't have to blatantly yell about it all the goddamn time like bigger metros and whatnot. We'll just quietly keep on overachieving and knocking it out of the park. And then when people do come, they see what we have. Like you said, during CBC, people were like, wow, the Twin Cities are fantastic. This is amazing. This is a cool beer scene, but also just a cool downtown. Somebody said this felt like one of the last remaining true American cities, like not like a huge sprawling metro or anything like that, but just like a working person's city. And I appreciated that comment.
Well, in the art scene, the music scene, the food scene, I was irate when I heard that the current season of Top Chef chose Milwaukee and Madison over the Twin Cities, because I feel like we have a way better food scene here. And it just irks me because I'm like, come on.
My wife is from Wisconsin. Her family owned a supper club growing up, so I don't get to comment on that as much. But a main reason they chose that side of things is definitely supper club culture, I'm sure. But I mean, when you actually look at like James Beard's and stuff like that the Twin Cities have been able to produce, it's pretty remarkable.
Yeah. So your involvement, you're involved currently in beer and politics through the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild. Give me the Cliff Notes definition of what does the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild do?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, in general, kind of our mission statement is, we're here to protect, promote, and grow the craft beer industry in the state of Minnesota. At the end of the day, the Guild is the gathering spot for brewers of the state, a place for brewers to have their voices heard, and to try to consensus build. That's a lot of it.
Okay.
And stakeholder building and stuff like that. So having said that, the history of the Guild is pretty long and winding itself, starting in 2000. I think the first meeting was in the basement of Town Hall on February 16th, 2000. And it's gone through so many different iterations and so many different, what is the Guild, what isn't the Guild. For a long time, the Guild was kind of the main entity for legislative pushes and stuff like that. And then it was decided that the Guild would have no hand and that every business was up to itself to champion or lobby or do legislative work. And then kind of has gone back and forth. So the question has always kind of, and continues to change as to exactly what the Guild is here to do and to help for. But at the end of the day, I think those 3 points are really what ultimately we are there to do. And that, again, is to protect from a legislative standpoint, make sure that we don't lose any rights that we're currently granted, which is the first bylaw in our legislative committee. Promote, through all the different beer festivals, All Pints North, on Brewery View, but also the State Fair, doing press interviews and getting press out to different members, stuff like that to promote, and then grow to, again, legislatively try to make sure that we're giving good economic opportunities to the members of Minnesota, but also, trying to make it easy and being, again, a consensus point for people with that knowledge, kind of like I talked about that community. There are people who have opened breweries before in smaller rural areas. What questions do you have? We have members who can answer that. There are breweries who have opened huge facilities in metro downtowns. What questions do you have? We have members who can answer that. So, so that's also a big part of it as well. So, ultimately, it's just kind of we're here to help as best we can, and we're member run. Our board is strictly voluntary. So ultimately, it kind of comes down to hearing from our members, having hard discussions as a legislative committee, marketing and whatnot committee, and then our board kind of making decisions as to this is what we need to do and this is how we're going to do it. So.
Your involvement currently is mostly on the political side, and I want to kind of, before we talk about like what's currently going on, some of the big laws recently that have been passed. I know that the ability to sell anything other than simply a growler or a 750 milliliter bottle, huge. what was that process like? And when it passed, did you just crack a bottle of champagne and fill up the bubble bath and turn on some Enya and just, how did you celebrate that?
I did indeed crack open a bottle of champagne as well as a West Coast IPA from Bad Weather, actually, on the day that the bill was finally signed. Yeah, that one was that bill was interesting in how it came about, especially because it came out of the pandemic, and that's not a lot of people, I think, really recognize or realize just how little the state legislature did for craft brewers during the pandemic. Surprisingly, the federal government did exactly what we needed them to do, and that's the reason why we didn't see such a huge chunk of breweries close. But PPP, I mean, there's no way, 3/4 of these members would have survived without it. On a state level, pretty much every state, whether it was the executive branch or the legislative branch, made certain concessions to allow breweries to continue surviving and thriving. Minnesota really did not.
I remember that.
And that was super frustrating from a brewer's standpoint, because a lot of our membership, not all, but a lot of them even agreed with shutting tap rooms down and closing them for the betterment of public health.
Yeah.
But if you're going to do that, then we need to find other avenues of making money, because that's our main source, especially for a lot of breweries and brew pubs at that time. So the fact that there was no concession made was pretty frustrating. But I think that also did open the eyes of a number of legislators to begin opening the conversation to getting 4- and 6-packs back on the table. And I give a lot of credit to especially Chair Stevenson, the Chair of Commerce in the House. He kind of brokered the entire deal on that bill. And so I started in the Guild and working at the Guild in February 22. So I started right after sessions started. So I kind of hopped in as things were moving along. But it was a lot of, do we accept this? Do we not accept this? It was a lot of me going on Slack or, calling our board, saying, hey, we're being approached with this. Do we take it? And so it was a very long, drawn out, very dramatic negotiation process that ultimately, it is of great benefit to the brewers of the state. Did it go far enough? It did not. No, 100%. But at the same time, it definitely has been very helpful for a number of our breweries, both small and large. So it was a very interesting session to get across the finish line. And then I thought the next session was going to be easy peasy. We weren't going to have a whole lot of, we just passed this historic liquor bill, which not a lot of people realize, but liquor bills, especially of that magnitude, do not happen very often in the state of Minnesota. So I thought we'd have some time to kind of figure everything out, and it turns out #no. Last session was the busiest in probably Minnesota history, and definitely for us as a guild too. But so it's been a couple interesting times in years to be under the dome.
Sure. Now, when that bill was passed, I remember talking to people, and there was a lot of, I'm not going to say consternation and hand-wringing, but there was the thing in the bill that said, all right, if you accept this, there's a thing in the bill that says we're going to take a 5-year.
It's not technically in the bill, but we did agree as stakeholders for a 5-year basically ceasefire, just bring no major liquor reform to the Capitol for 5 years.
Okay. Would the bill have happened without that agreement?
Not.
Okay.
No.
What was the motivation behind that?
So a lot of it comes down to there's a lot of history, a lot of. Turns out the political world is highly political and dramatic. Who knew?
Story at 11.
Yes. At the end of the day, a lot of why things ended up the way that they did is, again, you actually look at major beer bills. We had the brew pub bill initially. I think that would have been late 80s, 90s. I can't recall the exact passing date. Took a long time. The next biggest beer legislation probably would have been the taproom bill, and that would have been 2011.
2011.
And then That's pretty much
Sunday sales was 2017.
Sunday sales would have been, I think you could have considered that for sure. Not necessarily as impactful for a lot of our members, but certainly does impact, and major liquor for sure. And then, so that's 2017. And then we were only able to get what we did in 2022. So, I mean, like, you really do not see major bills any quicker than 5 years in the state of Minnesota.
Yeah.
And so this was just kind of solidifying that and agreeing to that. But also a lot of our frustration in the past has just been that we have felt like we have been left out of the conversation legislatively. And this 5-year kind of quote-unquote ceasefire allows us, I think, a lot of really, really good opportunity to actually work with other stakeholders and not constantly be yelling at legislators. Because at the end of the day, that doesn't necessarily pass bills.
Right.
They don't necessarily love being yelled at. And it doesn't mean you have to play necessarily like a dirty political game. It's just literally me being at the Capitol and having discussions and being available to answer questions.
Forging relationships so that when you do open up the conversation in a few years, you're not starting from a point of being on the defense.
Yep.
But you can have a more fruitful discussion.
Yeah, and I mean, also, I'll be, very straightforward that I think it's a lot of sitting down and having beers is a lot of what needed to be done, and it just wasn't being done in that environment. And part of that is because there was just anger from people yelling, not completely justified in their yelling. I'm not saying that they aren't, but trying to figure out where other stakeholders are coming from and their points of view, and recognizing that they have members as well, and that we're all part of a very large, complex ecosystem.
Yeah.
And we need to protect our aspect of that ecosystem, but at the same time, that doesn't necessarily negate the rest of the ecosystem either. And so a lot of what my job has been, and the way I kind of describe it is, more than anything on the government relations side, is quote unquote building our legislative maturity. So again, kind of going from a straight, just grassroots type format of trying to get legislation passed, of actually, again, having me up there, wearing a lobbyist badge, and we have a political action committee. So more than anything, kind of now saying, like, we understand how politics does function, and we're willing to operate kind of in that realm a little bit more than maybe we have been in the past, rather than just trying to find one or two legislative champions and putting it all on them. Now trying to actually like build more relationships, and even at our day at the Capitol last Friday, 2 Fridays ago, visiting a lot of people who I blatantly told them, who we had members in their district, blatantly telling them, like, I know I will never have your vote. I'm not asking necessarily for your vote, but if you ever have questions about beer or any of these issues, please, this is my card. Feel free to reach out. And I think, even things like that, at the end of the day, do go a rather long way in just saying that we're here to be part of the conversation.
Hey, thank you so much for listening. Hopefully you're enjoying a One Pint Stand. My aim is to help spread the word about craft beer. Enjoying craft beer is a passion of mine, and I love chatting about it with other people. A One Pint Stand has a goal of helping breweries tell their stories. I love to get out in and beyond Minnesota to visit breweries, beer bars, and meet other interesting beer people. If you are also into those things, you probably want to keep tabs on the show. So go ahead and follow A One Pint Stand on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We would also appreciate any and all positive reviews on Spotify and iTunes to help make it easier for other craft beer listeners to find us. If you like reading about craft beer, I started my own blog, and all of my writing can be found at aonepintstand.com. After 8 years of writing as editor-in-chief at Beer Pluma, it was time for me to start my own blog. So make sure you check out the blog for some interesting craft beer content of the written variety. I truly appreciate you listening and taking time to enjoy our stories. Now, back to the show.
How about a beer?
So, as seemingly plotting and kind of like nose to the grindstone all of the beer laws have been, THC is like I compare it like a boulder wall to a slip and slide. The THC seems to be going very well. Why the contrast?
I mean, THC is going well, but I definitely would not go so far as to say slip and slide. There's been a lot of work, and last session was not my favorite session by any stretch of the imagination. But I do think there's, the way that Minnesota went about legalization with the edible cannabinoid bill in 22, which I want to be very upfront about, like, was not our initiative. We had no hand in. That was definitely not. In fact, it wasn't even until after a session that I was having a beer with a mentor that I really know and trust, and I showed him that language because I thought he would experiment with some Delta 8 things because I thought it just basically expanded limits on Delta 8. He read through it. He was like, no, this is way bigger than you think it is. And then, a couple weeks later, 3 of my members are like, can we do this? And it's like, yeah, I guess so. So I think going about it that way, one, it was definitely the Wild West for a while there. But the good thing about even that Wild West time is the sky didn't fall. No, there were no upticks in traffic accidents. There were nobody who was serving or selling these beverages really saw any incident. So it kind of went to show like this is not something that we need to even address or pull back. Our thing was very much, every legislator that I talked to before session last year, it was a very good opening line for them because I would walk up to them and I would say, hey, I'm going to ask you for something that I would not ask you any other session. Can we get more regulations around this and can we start paying taxes? And they were like, well, that is not normally what people approach us with. But our kind of way of thinking, especially as craft brewers, we are used to heavy regulation. And there's reasons for it. And there's no getting around it. There's public safety issues to be had. And so for us to operate in this new market, we wanted there to be limitations. And ultimately, we wanted to be part of the conversation of setting those limitations and seeing what was working out in the market, what isn't working out in the market, what can we twiddle, what can we kind of adjust. And I think we ended up in a really, really good place. The session last year was just very highly, highly contested, highly, highly dramatic, from both the actual cannabis side of things, the adult use cannabis side, because they did not necessarily love what we were doing. And then even on the hemp side, there was a lot of contention and a lot of drama and disagreement. And we didn't waver in our political pathway forward. I was always very upfront with like, this is what we're doing and this is why to membership. And definitely there were plenty of times where members disagreed. But again, I think the fact that we did not stray is ultimately why we ended up in the place that we did, which is, really setting the stage for the rest of the country as to how these products can be produced and regulated and served.
So Minnesota has become kind of like the blueprint or playbook for that. What do you attribute that to?
Well, I mean, a lot of it is because you're right. We very much are, and even after the bill passed last session, a lot of my summer was spent fielding calls from brewers or guild leaders or lobbyists from other states, being like, "You did what? What language did you use on? Okay, can you send me more info on that?" And always very open to say, yeah, sure. I mean, we're happy to help wherever we can. What I don't think a lot of people really realize is ultimately like what Minnesota did was we are not the only state that can sell and serve these products.
Right.
But most of the states are operating in this kind of gray area because the Federal Farm Bill of 2018 legalized it federally.
Okay.
And so a lot of the states either didn't know that you could produce this higher amount of Delta 9 from such low concentrations of THC in the hemp plant, or there's also a fair amount of states that are never going to address legalization.
Yeah.
At least not anytime soon. And so for them to even touch this subject would be like, no, that is not our field. If it's federally legal, great, but it's not our job. We're not interested.
Yeah.
What Minnesota did was we were the first state to turn that gray into black and say, like, no, you can produce these products. You just have to have them tested in this manner. You have to have them labeled in this manner. They cannot exceed this limit. They have to be stored this way. And so what we did was verify kind of a gray market. And that's been super, super exciting, again, because no one necessarily has done this. One of our initiatives this session was to eventually in March of 2025 next year, you will be able to serve THC beverages on tap.
Okay, and that's a new thing because right now
it has to be served in its original package, which would be considered the can. We this session have language introduced that hopefully we'll be bumping that up to July of this year, and hopefully it'll pass. It's looking good so far, but it's a little disconcerting and maddening because a couple of months ago there was a brewery in Texas that did THC on tap, and I just heard that there's a brewery in Wisconsin that's doing THC on tap. It's like, I wanted to be the first, but we will be the first that says it's okay. We will be the first that actually has ingrained language protecting the ability to do it. And that's kind of what I don't think a lot of people really realize was we brought legitimacy to this new exciting market that, again, it brings in just a whole different consumer. It brings in a whole different consumer into our tap rooms and our liquor stores, but it also brings in a whole new consumer to dispensaries further on down the line, which I think the actual adult use folks are starting to realize. So it's a really weird and exciting time. If you would have asked me in 2022 if I ever would have considered myself a THC cannabis lobbyist, hell no. This was never never in the playbook.
Yeah.
But like everything, I work on the issues and initiatives that my members and my legislative committee and my board tell me, and this was certainly important enough for enough of those voices to say we need to do this, and we did it. So.
Well, I mean, in addition to more Spotify downloads of the Grateful Dead and big bags of Doritos being sold, this has been a real economic boon to breweries. Yeah. In talking to people, this literally is a lifeline.
Yeah, initially when I started kind of talking with legislators, I would say, I wouldn't say that this has necessarily saved anyone, but it's been really beneficial. And now, after talking with so many members, I cannot count on both of my hands how many breweries that this probably actually has prevented from shuttering.
Yeah.
And that's why, again, it is an exciting time, and to hear from members that sometimes for some of them, the general area I hear from most people is 10% of their production is THC. That's nuts to me.
Yeah.
Especially because
it's a big number.
For for the amounts that we're producing and for how new it is, and for the fact that it still is, there are gray areas as to how you could serve it on site and all this other stuff. It's a huge number, and to hear from places like, I think Top 10 Liquors came out recently and said that THC has outsold their entire craft portfolio. It's sold any specific type of wine, spirits, it's making a mark, for sure. And I think you're starting to see people who would traditionally not enter this space, including other stakeholders, starting to see that there is a market for this. And again, you didn't want to necessarily go to bat for it in the early days because you didn't know exactly how it would shake out from a public health perspective.
Yeah.
We trust, especially because we're craft brewers, we interact and we produce an intoxicating substance. We trust our consumer. When we trust them, we trust us to treat it safe enough that they know what they're getting into, and hopefully they trust themselves and are cognizant enough of their bodies to know how much they can imbibe and why. And there's no real difference in what substance it is. We still trust them to care about their community and themselves. And I think that trust has paid off for us being kind of a leader.
Yeah. It's interesting to me. As we're talking, I'm hearing a lot of positives. What are the negatives? What do you think would prevent a brewery from wanting to do a THC beverage?
I think there's a number of different things. First and foremost, I like one of the things I still hear from a decent amount of members, and also some old school, some of the founders of the guild that I still talk to and whatnot. We're brewers. We brew beer. Like this is not our space. This is not what we do. Where is the artistry or the craft in these beverages? And I think all that is certainly fair. Having said that, my argument too is like this is where we start. We start with these like seltzers. Like who's to say where this market can go as craft brewers? It is our job to create new ways and flavors of exploring this beverage, this new market, and who is better suited to do that than craft brewers? And that's ultimately been our argument for a number of different things, including just the fact that we can produce these beverages. It's like, well, we're used to heavy regulation. We're used to operating in a 21+ environment. We're used to, sending it out to market this way. Who is better suited for these beverages than craft brewers? And it also opens up, I'm kind of going on a sidetrack, but it also opens up one of the interesting things about this market as opposed to when craft beer first started. You don't need a whole lot of capital to invest in brew house and fermentation tanks and all of this. If breweries are allowed to do that, you, as a new brand, can actually go to them and R&D with them and have them produce it and package it and you use their distribution channels if you so choose. So it's a lot easier for more market access for innovation. So I think that's one of the main reasons why I think a lot of brewers jumped in as well. And I do also think, there obviously is a public health concern. There always will be, and I don't ever want to negate that because there are certain risks that come along with cannabis and THC, and certainly certain risks in mixing THC and alcohol. Our argument to that ultimately is, again, most people are not necessarily going to go overboard when they're out in public, especially people who don't know how these beverages affect them. Most of the people who do consume these beverages are either people who are super familiar with THC, and this is just like what they want to drink when they're out on the town. They're not looking to get ripped. This is just a nice social tonic for them to hang out with friends and who are having a beer. Or the other people who consume these beverages are what we consider cannabis-curious consumers, and so that's going to be kind of the 70-year-old grandmother who wants to sleep a little better, or the athlete with joint pain. And they are just experimenting with THC for the first time. I don't know any of them that would do it publicly off the bat. And that's
not going to throw down at bingo night.
No. And that's why we wanted it in kind of unconventional channels like liquor stores and grocery stores, so that they felt comfortable getting a 4-pack, bringing it home, seeing if THC was a benefit to their lifestyle. And for many people, it won't be, absolutely. And that's totally fine. But we want to give people the opportunity to see if it fits in their lifestyle. And the reason why we're so adamant about the low dose and heavy testing, heavy regulation is so that the consumer knows what they're getting. So when they are at the bar, if they know they can handle 2.5 milligrams, then they know they can buy a 2.5 milligram or a 5 milligram and have half of it. And I think there's just not many people that really see that consumer taking the time or care to really dial in their dosage or to become familiar with the substance. I think a lot of them think they'll just roll the dice and they'll have to deal with the consequences. And I think that's a fair assessment. But again, we just haven't seen that happen in the market. Literally, none of my members I've talked to have seen any incident. In fact, most people have said that their tap rooms are a little more chill. They've seen less incidents since they've started serving these beverages. So, and then I also think stigma is still a big part. And we do see a lot of people in particular kind of more rural, smaller communities more hesitant to kind of jump into the game because they don't know how the community will accept it. Ultimately, a lot of the members I've met who are in smaller rural communities who have jumped in, they've been overwhelmingly surprised by just how accepted and celebrated it has become in some of those smaller rural and farm towns. But that's not to negate that there isn't still a stigma. Of course, there is still a stigma, and we're going to have to deal with that for foreseeable future for sure. And just part of what we really want to do is really take away that stigma and literally just say that we want this to be equated, not even with alcohol, with beer.
Yeah.
We want these low-dose beverages to be treated just like beer is. And we've seen success in it for sure, but that doesn't mean that you're not going to see hesitation, especially when you are leading the world in how you're doing this market. So
it's all very fascinating to me. I think it's nice that it has provided kind of a new way for breweries to kind of make a little bit of hay when a lot of other signs are saying that craft beer consumption is slowing. So I want to kind of transition into that topic. We're obviously in a rough time. People's drinking habits have changed, especially with the younger segment of the demographic. I think people are becoming more in tune with how much they drink. They're considering what they drink. And now with the advent of THC beverage availability, I think some people are choosing that over alcohol. You are immersed in numbers, all sorts of things. A lot of people are scared. I mean, myself included, that we're not out of the woods. And as a matter of fact, when the pandemic hit, I specifically remember the Brewers Association came out with a statistic that when it happened and everything was shutting down, they said 46% of all the craft breweries, which numbered 9,000 plus at that time, could potentially shut down. Obviously, that didn't happen, but there are optics that would say that craft beer is in a really tricky situation. How concerned should we be about that?
Yeah. I mean, always concerned. I like to say that, craft brewers, we trust our refracts. Like, we know numbers. We live by numbers. And so to negate the numbers that we see or the trends that we see is not within our blood, and that's not who we are. So to see, less and less beer being produced and sold and drank, like you said, from, different demographics, including those just now becoming 21. Obviously there's cause for concern. Now, having said that, I do also, when it comes to kind of I constantly get the question, is craft beer dead? Is the bubble bursting?
I read that article. Yeah. That's why I asked.
and it's always a fair question, and those questions are not going to stop coming every time a brewery closes. And it's obviously incredibly sad every time a brewery closes, but they close for different reasons. And they they'll close for rent changing. I don't think a lot of people really realize that, when you sign a lease on a space, it tends to be reviewed every 7 to 10 years ago. Well, what happened 7 to 10 years ago in 2017, 2015? A hell of a lot of breweries opened up, and they built up a whole lot of really badass neighborhoods where rent is now expensive. And so you're not getting the same price that you did when you first moved in. So I think that part kind of goes unsaid for a lot of people. I think you're also seeing, especially during the pandemic as well, there's a fair amount of people who have found out that owning a business isn't fun, especially through a global pandemic. When craft beer was experiencing this triple-digit growth year over year, it's great. It's everyone was having a good time, but at the end of the day, you are still running a business, and you do still have to take care of your staff, and there's a lot of pressures and a lot of hassles that go with it. And I think there were some people who just decided this was not the lifestyle for them, and that's totally fair. There is no judgment on that. The one position I have never held at a brewery is owner, and there's a very good reason for that. I don't necessarily want that lifestyle. So I think a lot of that is definitely part of the conversation, but we do obviously know that trends are shifting. And we, again, always are looking at numbers. Numbers are always shifting. So who's to say as to, what craft beer will become again? But again, we are, in Minnesota at least, we're still seeing openings outpace closings by a decent margin. And until those line up or even start to excel over openings, I think that's more cause for concern.
Yeah.
But again, I do think also accepting the reality is the most important thing, and I think there is somewhat of a mentality of how do we get more people drinking beer and drinking Minnesota beer, and we want to make sure that we're doing that, and we want to make sure that we're promoting, again, members. But then also, part of the reason why we did focus so hard on THC this last session is one, the quote-unquote 5-year agreement.
Yeah.
But two, it is a really good opportunity in a space that is growing for the time being. We foresee it growing. There's no indication saying that it's slowing down or stopping. And it's kind of the same thing, too. A lot of people don't really realize the Twin Cities is such a hub for really good quality non-alcoholic beverages, in no small part because of ABV technology and what they've done for the game. And now you're seeing, people using, yeast that doesn't produce as much alcohol and creates NA and stuff like that. So we know that is a growing segment. It's not growing quickly or exponentially, but it's growing.
I mean, I was just at Summit last weekend, 2 weekends ago, and Mark Stuttard said it's not going to be too far off where NA beer will make up 15% of their production.
That's nuts.
Which is crazy to me.
Yeah. But I think that's, again, that to a certain degree, that's acknowledging that and acknowledging that there are a lot of people during the pandemic picked up some pretty unhealthy habits, including some drinking habits, and trying to negate that or say that that's not the case, I think is wrong. And I think we're entering a somewhat new era of craft beverage and of craft beer. And I was giving a talk to it's like 100-year-old Swedish gentleman's club. Long story, but either way, ended up being a super rad experience. And I basically talked about THC beverages and where they came from and where they're going and how Minnesota is doing everything. And but at one point during that speech, I said something that I attached to, and now that it's one of my talking points is like, as craft brewers, we're much more about the community more than anything else. And and I believe personally. I love these tap rooms and I love dive bars more than pretty much anything else in the world. But I believe everyone deserves a bar stool. And whether that is an alcohol drinker or if that is somebody who is California sober or if that is somebody who is fully sober, they all deserve to sit at that bar and share a laugh and join the community and the conversation. And I think for a long time there has just been such a large, to a degree, stigma and judgment. When somebody who is sober doesn't want to go out to a bar because there's not any good NA on, they feel pressure to imbibe and all this other stuff. And I think taking away that pressure and saying, no, you belong here, you belong in this bar stool, and we're gonna make beverages for you, and you are more than welcome. I think it's important for us as the producers of said beverages to get out ahead of it and make sure that that we're promoting that they are welcome and not that it's necessarily you're just taking up a seat but not adding any revenue. You are actually genuinely welcome, and your point of view is valid and needed in the conversations that are happening in these spaces.
Yeah. What will a lot of people like to use the analogy of a bubble bursting? What would that look like?
Yeah. I don't think that bubble burst is ever really necessarily gonna happen. Actually, Evan at Fair State had a good line a little while ago. I think it was in Racket about bubbles and bursting and how it's not really fair to even call what craft beer has experienced a bubble. But yeah, I don't think we're ever gonna just see like an instant collapse. And excuse me. Ultimately, I don't think we're ever going to see like an instant collapse. I think what we're seeing right now and what I'm trying to get across to members and beer drinkers is we are at a more mature point. As I like to say, we're at a cruising altitude. And craft beer for a long time was very much on the ascent. It was up, 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 up. Now we're in this area where we're just trying to maintain our cruising altitude. There's nothing wrong with that. That is what most business in America is this cruising altitude. So when it comes to kind of the bubble bursting or is craft beer dead, you know, again, talking about those kind of triple-digit 100% growth year over year, I'm somewhat of the mentality of like, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. No other industry really in America got to experience that explosion, got to experience, you know, I like to say music venues and breweries are the only two businesses where you wear your shirt that you bought there to the actual like establishment. That fandom and that support is not something most breweries or most businesses ever get to experience. So the fact that we have gotten to experience that was a godsend. Yeah. And again, I think the onus is on us to just look at ourselves in the mirror and realize that we now are at a cruising altitude. So let's figure out how best and most efficiently to cruise along.
Yeah. Yeah. Roughly a month ago, 3-4 weeks ago, the Minnesota Craft Brewers Guild had kind of what feels a lot like the Minnesota Craft Beer Oscars, the Minnesota
The
Brewers Cup.
Yeah.
Obviously, you were wearing your tuxedo.
No one else. Overdressed a little bit.
I loved it. Talk to me about that. Why is it important? I'm sure, you know, on the guild, a lot of the work that you all do is probably, I'm not going to say monotonous, but it's difficult work. You know, getting together, meeting with people, trying to keep every member happy. I don't even want to. I mean, when we watch a movie in my classroom, it's like the Lincoln Douglas debate of what are we going to watch, and it's like, God, why do I even suggest this? Because it's such a pain in the ass. But you know, on that night, there was such a wonderful vibe, an air of celebration and an air of, yes, we are enjoying this ride together. What did that night mean to you?
That night always means a fair amount to me. You know, this is only my third, I guess. Brewers Night, and only the second one that I've actually been able to be on stage or be a part of. But I think there is, with the way that things have, especially post-pandemic, with the way that things have shaken out, and you know, brewers just doing pivot after pivot after pivot after pivot, and looking at their ingredient suppliers, charging 3 times as much, and you know, trying to figure out, well, how high can I charge for a beer, and all these realities kind of hitting. I think there is an element of like, you need celebration, and we do this for each other and for our communities, but we also need to celebrate and take a step back and say we did make it through a pandemic, and we are supporting our communities, and we are getting by. You know, I was volunteering for the United Steelworkers when I was 2017, and this fella who I taught with, who was from Colombia and tried to organize the Coca-Cola plants down there, he said, you know, at the end of every meeting, we danced. And I thought, why are we dancing? This is so strange. We're being oppressed and all of this. And it was like the motto of the group, like, if we are not dancing, what are we doing this for? And kind of that mentality of like, you need to remember the joy of what you're doing. And there is so much joy in craft beer. That's what craft beer is. You know, it's bringing people together, and it's lifting your spirits, and it's, you know, taking 4 super simple ingredients and elevating them to one of the most complex beverages on earth. Like that takes skill, and that deserves to be celebrated. So to take a night, to step back with all of the members, and to see them smile, ultimately is just one of the greatest nights of the industry for me, just because getting to share some of those laughs and even, you know, I love seeing the, you know, tiny little 6-barrel brew house from, you know, way northeast win best hazy IPA or, you know, whatever, like right. To see these people who never anticipated actually winning an award getting up and saying a few words, I think is such a beautiful thing to see. And I honestly think, this year, the three best in show were, Surly, Arbeiter, and Summit.
Yeah.
And to show also that a lot of the big guys who have been around who do invest in quality, that it does pay off. And to also see Arbeiter in there as well, to know that, as smaller producers, you too can make quality. Like anybody has this ability to do it. So I think it's a good night for us to celebrate the industry, but also to kind of check in with the industry, and remember that we all are in this together. Everybody in that room is cheering for whoever wins. It's not. Sometimes we get bogged down in our business models or our brewery sizes or us versus them mentality, and our job as the guild, which we are not always successful at, but I try to every day, is to keep everybody on the same page and remember that we're all brewers, and we all started, most of us, in a kitchen or in a tiny little brew house somewhere, and we ended up here in this room on this night, and so to me that's it's really that community again, building and recognition that night really signifies for me.
Yeah. There were several takeaways for me. Just the fun. Everybody's in a good mood. Everybody's celebrating. I was at the table with the folks from Heavy Rotation and then half of the ownership from Wandering Leaf, and we were enjoying ourselves, and it's just fun to just kind of like relax and be and just like have fun with each other. I love that the Black Brewers podcast was emceeing. Yeah. That is fabulous, because for me, I'm a member of Brewing Change Collaborative. It's people of color in and around craft beer to increase education, diversity, and inclusion. Looking around the room, very white. I thought it was really cool to have Black Brewers podcast up there presenting. That made it fun. That made it seem inclusive. It's just nice to see that
visibility
visually
matters.
I mean, it's huge. Your speech was really, really powerful.
Good, because I did not prepare really anything. I went up to my room like 10 minutes before and literally wrote on a little notepad 5 talking points. I was like, well, we're going to see how this goes. So good to hear it played out well.
Yeah, I thought there was a really meaningful call to action. As guild members, what's the most important thing? How do they support each other? Because you've got members who are producing tens of thousands of barrels of beer a year, and you've got members that are producing a couple hundred. And I have to imagine that it's really difficult to try to make sure everybody's voice is heard. You've got breweries, you've got brew pubs, and there's not a level playing field there. How do you keep everybody aware of the importance of playing nice, and how do we, while there might be, Brewery A has it easier than Brewery B because of this, and this. Why aren't you talking about this? Why aren't we discussing this? What's the magical formula to try to keep everybody happy?
Straight up, there isn't one, and I'm not able to do it. That's the honest answer. Every business model is completely different. Every barrelage is gonna have different challenges, and our job, we are never going to be able to satisfy every single request or every single ask or anything to that matter. Our job is to do the goddamn best we can. And even in my speech that night, like I ended it with very blatantly saying, like, I have not achieved what I want to see achieved. And I don't think anyone can do that. The way that I want to see things happen. I I'm not a very large lover of myself, but like I think I've done a decent job and helped a fair number of people, but I haven't been able to get across the finish line that those main points that will make everybody happy. And like I said, I don't know that it can be done, but we're trying as much as we can. And the main thing that I try to get across to membership and that I try to ask from them and whatnot is you might not feel like your voice is heard, and you might historically feel like your voice isn't heard, but I am listening. And whether or not I can do anything about it right now, or whether or not in the future, or whether or not the board or the legislative committee is going to agree, which also we always need more people on the board and on the legislative committee. So there's always like I take direction from them. So any voices that don't feel like they're not heard, if you're part of those committees or boards, you'll be very heard. But no matter what, I am listening and doing the best that I can. And I know that that's not good enough for everybody, and I recognize that.
Yeah.
I think the main thing for me is to be open about that and to explain, what our difficulties are, what barricades are there, and ultimately, again, really try to get people to remember that even if we have not been successful, or we are not successful for your specific asks this session, or even next session, or this beer festival or next beer festival, we are very much way weaker when we are fighting amongst each other.
Right.
Like, even if you are not necessarily getting exactly what you want, that infighting ultimately means no one is going to get anything, and it pushes back whatever your initiative is. Doesn't matter what it is, it's going to push that back a fair amount.
Right.
Because at the end of the day, the only thing that we have is each other, and the strength in numbers and the unity. And I don't know any member who wishes any kind of ill will on any other member, no matter their size.
Yeah, I can't imagine
model.
that happens. There's a lot of good people in the guild.
I'm not going to say that there aren't assholes out there. Of course there are assholes, but I don't think there's anybody who straight up would not answer a question if you reached out to them and asked them. And,
right.
Or somebody who wouldn't give you feedback, or somebody who wouldn't try to help you as best as they could. And that, again, to me is the spirit of craft beer, is literally just trying to take these 4 ingredients and make it better, and trying to take your specific community and make it better, to take your little corner of whatever street you're on, make it a little bit better. We're all just trying to make it a little bit better. And by day, little by little, making it better, at the end, we're going to turn around and we're going to see just how far we've come. And but it is incremental. It is not, even the big bills that we have gotten, the historic bills, we're on the precipice of a third pretty historic goddamn session. I tell my members, don't get used to this. This is not normal. Most sessions are a success if we come out even, if we haven't lost anything. That's ultimately what our main goal is. But even if you look back at the last 3 years, has everyone seen the success that we were anticipating pre-pandemic? We have not, but I think we've achieved some pretty amazing things, and I can only give that credit for the fact that we have found a way to move forward together. And I think once we lose that, then we lose the ball game.
Yeah. Well, I think you are the perfect person for that role. You have the great temperament. You care. You put your passion into it, and that is very evident in your words and our conversation. So I just want to thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you.
Because as somebody who is very much on the periphery of the craft beer industry, I'm really excited when I have friends come to visit, to take them out to the breweries that I absolutely adore and introduce them to the people working there, enjoy the beers that they produce, and it just adds such a wonderful element to this state, and the kind of the types of people that are in the craft breweries, both just sitting at the bar stool and on the other side. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of quality individuals, and I just want to thank you for putting in as much hard work and as much of yourself as you do, because it's not easy.
No, it's not. And no, I very much appreciate it. And there are a good number of members who have pulled me aside, whether it was that night or even after, or reached out by email and expressed their thanks. As the guild, we don't hear thanks a lot, just because this is our job. And people are very passionate about it, and like I said, they may not feel always heard, or that their guild is supporting, promoting, protecting them to their ideal as to what they want. But there are a fair amount of people out there who do recognize that that we are trying, and I can guarantee you, for the rest of the staff, they're amazing at what they do, and they excel better than any other group that I've worked with. But at the end of the day, kind of to your point, and it was part of my speech too, is we are very much scientific artisans in what we create and care about our product. But at the end of the day, it's people. That is, we are in the business of people. We are in the business of employing people. We are in the business of serving people. And once you forget that, then there's no point anymore. Then why make beer if no one's going to drink it, if no one's going to come and hang out? Why make THC if no one's going to come and hang out? So I think you're very right in that it is people-driven, and that's what separates us from buying a 30 rack at the liquor store, right, is getting to actually know the person who had their hand in making these beverages, or in serving these beverages, or even just in imbibing these beverages.
Yeah.
People really is what it's about. And I want to thank you for having me on, and for being as engaged as you are in the industry. You might be quote unquote on the periphery, but like, I don't work at a brewery anymore, so it's really hard for me to even keep track of what the hell is happening out in the market. So there are plenty of times where I have to come back and listen to a podcast and be like, oh shit, this is a concern for members. Okay. So no, I thank you for doing what you do for the people of this community, and it's very, very much noticed, and I appreciate it back at you.
Yeah. So if somebody's listening to this and they're like, wait, Minnesota has a Craft Brewers Guild, how can people, if you've been living under a rock, how do people keep track of what's going on?
Yeah.
And what's coming up?
mncraftbrew.org is our website, and we keep that pretty well updated. Also, social media, Instagram, Facebook, those are always good ways to check in, and we're constantly, promoting, especially if there's an event coming up or anything like that. But yeah, other than that, a lot of it is checking in with your members, and a lot of people are, when they ask me like, what can we be doing to, support breweries nowadays? It's like, well, support breweries. Like, go out, go to the tap room, go have a beer.
Do what we're doing here. Come have a beer.
Because this is ultimately what we are about. And I know times are tough, not just for our members or brewers, but for the average citizen right now. But it is kind of that, as I like to say during the pandemic, like, breweries' business model is literally like, you take care of your community is going to take care of you. And we saw that in the pandemic with people coming to buy takeout and get 15 crowlers to bring home.
Not that there's anything wrong with that. If you did that, that's great.
Again, you're supporting breweries. Yeah. So that's kind of always my rallying call is get out, and whether you're at their tap room or at your local liquor store or bar, like, pick up something that you've interacted with.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dan,
for coming on and talking. I learned a ton. I can only imagine what my 12 listeners are going to say when they hear all this good stuff.
I'm excited to learn, as I'm the number 12, so yes. I'm anxious to hear what I said.
Yeah. All right. Well, this has been another on location episode of One Pint Stand here at Bad Weather with Bob Galligan. Thank you so much. Cheers.
Well, I cannot thank Bob enough for giving a marvelous insight into the craft beer industry and how he helps the Guild engage at the state capitol. I think Bob is tremendously passionate, incredibly articulate, and is a master communicator. Those skills serve him well both at the Capitol and in the tap room having a beer. I just learned so much listening to him, and I didn't want the conversation to end. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. With that, we are at the close of another episode of A One Pint Stand, a Minnesota craft beer podcast where the pants stay on, but the caps come off. Cheers.
Yeah, now the first thing I notice before we get into any of the conversation is this. In the last 3 times I've seen you, 2 of those times you've been wearing a tuxedo. So this is a...